everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. I'm your host, Scotty. This is my co-host, Saur. I am desperate to have this episode, and I will tell you why in a minute. But before I do, I just want to ask you, how are you feeling on this lovely Thursday evening?
I'm feeling great. You know what? I'm a very organized person and I'm always waiting in the waiting room 20 minutes before the show's supposed to start, just gathering my thoughts. And I think you need to start doing the same. It'll avoid some of the chaos that we have to go behind the scenes, So maybe that's something that you can think about and develop. But other than that, I'm doing well. Just that minor complaint. Need to show up 20 minutes before so that we can prepare for this episode. Otherwise, it's very chaotic start, isn't it? What do you think, Scotty?
That's a lovely idea. I will try my best moving forward. Okay, so here's the deal. Here's why I wanted to talk about this and do this midweek episode, because I think it would have been reasonable for us to go from the post-game show to straight into the pre-game show for PSG and not really take a midweek break. But I felt this was really important because I think Inter Miami has done something incredible. And I think this time next week, we're not going to feel as good about it. And whether that's because of what happens against PSG or whether it's what happens against the next opponent or the next opponent, I think there's a real chance that this is not going to end with Inter Miami being the best team in the world. And if that's the case, there will come a time where we are sad about the Club World Cup. But that's not right now. And so I really wanted to take a midweek episode and spend an hour talking about how cool it is what Inter Miami has accomplished. So we will spend some time at the end talking some initial thoughts on PSG. We will do a little bit on Palmeiras in the beginning because I know you didn't get a chance to be on that post-game recap. So we will do some other stuff in this episode as well. But I really wanted to make sure us as Inter Miami fans and the community as a whole has a chance to really just appreciate and enjoy this high of this Inter Miami era, because I think it's really worth appreciating. And I think if you get so caught up in what's next, you don't fully enjoy what you've done. And then all of a sudden it's going to be over and you're not going to have truly appreciated it fully. So I do want to have that conversation, but let's start with your thoughts on the Palmeiras game, because we did the instant reaction, but you had a very busy schedule and I wanted to make sure we had time to do this. So I did the post-game recap on Tuesday, and I wanted to get your thoughts on the game now that you've had a chance to digest it, and if there's anything else you thought that I didn't cover or we should have covered, or that was just on your mind about that Palmeiras game.
No, I thought that was a really, really good game up until like the 80th minute. Inter Miami was on top. The stats may not show that. I think the advanced stats, when you look at it, Palmeiras seems to have 22 shots, but Inter Miami had around 8 shots, but a lot more dangerous opportunities. Overall, I thought Inter Miami definitely had the perfect game plan. They knew exactly how they wanted to execute it. The players, the starting 11 was definitely the first game that Inter Miami played where I thought every single player knew exactly what they were doing and were executing it to perfection. Not a single player did I think was standing out in terms of not able to accomplish the goals that the coach had set for themselves. Allende with a beautiful, beautiful goal. I thought that finish was fantastic, had so much time. He could have overthought it. Somebody who hasn't been particularly good in front of goal this tournament, I thought he would miss that, but so well taken. It was clear how Inter Miami wanted to play. And the most heartening thing about that, for me at least, was Lionel Messi was not 100%, and yet Inter Miami looked like the better team. So imagine if Lionel Messi was involved in the game in the complete sense that we've seen him in the last 2 games. So there was a lot of positives to take away. But at the end of the day, it was the result that matters. And it was 2-2 only because Inter Miami did not have the depth. We constantly talked about how good Inter Miami's depth is compared to other MLS teams, how good this roster has been in terms of making sure we are covered in every single area of the pitch. Two more players if we had available. Yannick Bright, of course, and then perhaps a winger, which we don't necessarily have in this roster. That would have maybe gotten us across the line, but the subs completely changed the game. As good as the first starting 11 was, I think the subs took away some of the rhythm that we had, some of the game plan that we had. And then as soon as Palmeiras had that first sniff at goal, they started to dominate. And then the last 10, 15 minutes into Miami was basically hanging on, a little bit reminiscent of the Columbus game in the Leagues Cup where Inter Miami was up by 2 goals. This time, though, the coach did make the changes, and that's what I think ended up hurting us a little bit. I'm not blaming Javier Mascherano. I don't think he had too many options. Perhaps a sub here or there was a little bit too early, and he could have waited. But I think there were a lot more positives to take away from that game. We're a little bit salty because that means we're now going to have to play PSG, and there would have been a genuine chance for Inter Miami to beat Botafogo. But it is what it is. We take it. You mentioned it at the start. I remember you retweeted the tweet from June 14th, I believe, where you said success for Inter Miami would be one draw and two competitive games. We've gone above and beyond that. So the Palmeiras game is always obviously it stands as an individual and we can analyze it as much as we can want to. There were faults, there were positives throughout, but I think it's the larger context that matters in a group where Inter Miami was, according to us, the underdog, maybe not according to the odds. Inter Miami was, I think, the better team across 3 games and across 270 minutes. And I didn't think I would utter that sentence before this Club World Cup started. So for me, I'm very proud of my team. I'm very proud for how they played. And regardless of that little bit of a heartbreak towards the end where we conceded 2 goals, I think we have to really enjoy and celebrate this moment because it might not ever come back. So, the perfect time to do this episode, the perfect time to take stock of what has gone by, to just sit back, uh, absorb and assimilate some of the fun stuff that we've seen over the last 3 games. Because after this, if Inter Miami gets knocked out against PSG, we'll go straight back into MLS action and that will reorient our mindset completely. So, I think this is the perfect time to take stock and just revel in our glory for what it is and what it has been so far.
Yeah, you mentioned a tweet I had, and not just a tweet I had, but when we went on the podcast and we talked about what does competitive success look like in this tournament, I laid out 2 criteria that I felt were fair because I thought this team could compete, and those were can they have a earned point, not just a smash and grab, but a point where they actually prove they belong, or at least 2 games where they're really competitive and they don't get blown out. And either or, it was like either or. And I think we all, well, you didn't argue too much with that. And I don't think anyone in the chat argued too much with that. And so I think the response makes me feel like that was fair. And they did so much better than that. And so, and let me remind you, I have been, I think, the most optimistic of anyone about this tournament going back to last December, about Inter Miami's chances. And even I thought, like, we'll see. Like, these teams are legit, and we'll see. And so for them to blow past that, right? They did that in every single game. They got a point and were competitive. And at least when they needed to, they were more than competitive and got more than a point. Inter Miami goes through second in the group with a chance, 6 inches in the first game, 6 inches in the third game, and Inter Miami is topping this group. And so, forgetting about what the ramifications are for coming second, I think this is still a tremendous success. I don't think anyone could say truly that Palmeiras had a more successful group stage. Like, they weren't better throughout the group stage. The difference between what they did and what we did is in the finest of margins, and really is more a technical difference than anything competitive. And so I think it's fair to say Inter Miami was as good as anyone in this group and possibly the best team.
By the way, talking of the finest of margins, if that penalty hadn't been given against Porto, which I don't believe was a penalty in the first place, Inter Miami and Palmeiras would be inseparable.
Yeah.
You could not differentiate. The goal difference would be the same. The head to head would be the same. Everything would be the same. So they'd have to go down to the minutest of, if that's a word, the littlest of differences. So you're absolutely right. One decision by an individual referee takes us into second place, but that shouldn't even be the point of this conversation. I think we need to celebrate the fact that Inter Miami was not just
Well, that
competitive, was the
that
best
is
team
the
in the
point,
group.
though, because
Yeah.
by realizing how small the margins are, you realize how good Inter Miami was.
Yeah.
Because the separation between them having, 9 points and 5 is really small. The difference between them being first and second was not about their quality on the pitch. It was about a referee decision here, a VAR decision here or there. Ustari's elbow being 6 inches lower or 6 inches higher on a play, Mohamed El Shanawi being 6 inches to his left or his right when there's a header from Maxi. Like it was a game of inches. That is what separated the Inter Miami and Palmeiras, and I thought it was much more than that separated them and Porto and Al Ahly. So I think it was a huge success. And the other thing is when we look at the context of the whole group stage, and I know there's a couple more games starting now, but I think it's sort of relevant to the point I'm about to make, but only insofar as it clarifies the details. The teams from South America, I thought, were incredibly impressive in this tournament, and all 4 Brazilian teams have gone through. But even the Argentine teams, which I thought had some pretty impressive performances, they're out. And all the African teams, we had a lot of respect for Al Ahly. I thought Mamelodi was incredibly fun to watch in this tournament and were unlucky or had a few mistakes that cost them an opportunity to get to the next stage. We will see what Al Ahly can do tonight. But really, it's the Brazilian clubs, it's the European clubs, and it's these two little minnows from North America, Monterrey and Inter Miami. Those are the only teams that have gotten into the round of 16. So when we are talking about what I think is an incredible performance over 3 games from Inter Miami, it's not just how they faced these 3 teams, but it's how other teams in this competition may have looked good for 1 game. They may have had a really impressive half. They may have stood tall against giants, but they didn't overcome them. They didn't beat them. They didn't get the results they needed. They didn't have that little extra that got them over the top in a way that Inter Miami did. And I think that is also worth celebrating.
We kept talking about moments. We kept talking about how Inter Miami needs to generate moments to be able to win the game. But honestly, if you think about it, over the course of 270 minutes, Inter Miami was able to generate the most number of moments when it comes to minnow teams, if you want to call them that, right?
Yeah.
A lot of these teams had some really good opportunities. They just weren't able to get it across the finish line. And Inter Miami was able to put together, if you call it luck, if you call it ability, if you call it talent, whatever it was. I think I underestimated Inter Miami's ability to show out on the big stage and the global stage. And honestly, it goes to show the gap is actually a lot less than what people think it is. And Inter Miami was better prepared. The mentality was right there from the beginning. And honestly, I think that's a really proud moment.
Jerry says that when teams are tied for points and goals, the next criteria is yellow cards. Uh, I think that may have gone our way because I know Palmeiras got a number of yellow cards in that first game. In a way that Inter Miami got away with it in the second and third game. So we'll. I don't know what the answer is, but again, it just goes to show you that the margins are super super fine. Um, the first question that I guess I wanted to talk about or ask broadly is how impressive what Inter Miami did was when we compare it to what happened everywhere else. And I know we're starting to get there, but again, Monterrey earned some very tough draws against good teams. And then they beat the Minnow, and that was good enough to get them through. Every other team in this competition was one of the big teams, was one of the giants that's still in it. Every other minnow had a performance. I mean, even Auckland City had one game where they felt good about themselves.
They scored a goal.
Yeah, they scored. They got a draw.
They got a draw. They got points.
And so they got a point. But the point is, Inter Miami did something that no team from Africa did, no team outside of Brazil from South America did, no other MLS team did, no other MLS team came close to doing. We'll see what happens with Al Hilal, but no Asian team so far. And Al Hilal, for as impressive as the draw against Real Madrid was, they still have to go get their win. They haven't gotten their win yet. And so I know they're playing right now, but like that might not happen for them. And then all of a sudden, Miami, Monterrey, who had, I thought, tough performances, but they never looked like the better team against River Plate. They didn't look like the better team against Real Madrid. They did what they had to do. Inter Miami bullied their way into this next round, and I think they should feel great about it, honestly. And I think Inter Miami fans should feel great about it because, again, I watched people talk about how we're going to lose by 6 goals. I watched how people said we're not going to have a chance. We're not going to get a point. Maybe if we beat Al Ali, that's our only chance. Like all of those comments came in over and over and over again. And by the way, they're still coming in. They never let off. Even going into this next game, people are still saying the same thing. And so I just don't want Inter Miami fans to lose sight of how we were feeling 2 weeks ago, just because the team was awesome.
And I think there's a way to contextualize this entire conversation, and I hope I do a good job of vocalizing it, or at least explain what I'm thinking. Essentially, a lot of these other teams like Monterrey, River Plate, Al Hilal, Urawa Reds, they were in groups where there was one clear team where everyone knew, okay, this team is going to go through, perhaps two. But more or less, it was one team that everyone expected to go through, 3 teams competing at certain parity, and then trying to understand, trying to play out the second position among themselves. I think people fail to realize within that dynamic, it's actually easier for some of the minnow teams to get through because one result here, one result there can actually skew the entire point system. If one team just has a blowout of results, gets all 9 points, it becomes slightly easier for the other next team that may not be at the same highest level as the first one, but is slightly better than the other two to get through. But some of these teams struggle to do that. Monterrey, of course, got through, but River Plate, somebody thought they would get through. Sundowns, I think, had a good opportunity as well, but they weren't able to capitalize on that. A lot of these teams, as you mentioned, none of the Argentinian teams went through. I think CONCACAF overall has done really, really well. But with Inter Miami's group, it was completely different because it was parity across the board. I remember you texting me on the side as soon as the first game against Palmeiras and Porto finished. You're like, it's probably not good for Inter Miami that they draw. We would have actually preferred to have a win because that would have sort of played out in the point system a lot better. And this was when we were thinking that Inter Miami is probably only going to be able to win one game, maybe draw one game. And then we weren't expecting Inter Miami to perform so well in all 3 games. So when you were thinking about it in that way, it was very difficult in this group because the parity was across the board. So anyone could have pipped anyone. But the most impressive thing was that Inter Miami, in a group where the parity is so clear, was able to stand head and shoulders above. And by the end of this 270 minutes, by the end of the third game, Inter Miami had their destiny in their own hands. They didn't have to worry about the Al Ali game. They didn't have to worry about what the result of the other game would be. They could beat the other team. They could beat Palmeiras and they could go through. Like the fact that we got to that point where our destiny was in our control, we were the better team. We didn't have to rely on results from here and there, despite the fact that we were going up against 3 teams that were quite evenly matched. It's an underrated achievement and honestly needs to be analyzed how well Inter Miami has been able to surpass the peers and actually perform at a level where we were up until the very last point going to go through as the number 1 team in the group.
Can I ask you a broader question? Because I know you are absolutely a Eurocentric, Euro biased soccer fan.
Completely agree.
Has this tournament in the last 2 weeks become the biggest club tournament in the world? And let me rephrase that. Is the team that wins this the best team in the world?
It's hard to judge because a lot of good teams, or a lot of very good teams across the board, I think, are still not in this tournament. Because this was the first one and they've gone through the criteria of picking teams who've achieved confederation trophies from 2021 onwards, there's the case to be made that not all the best teams in the world are representative here. I don't want to downplay that. I think that's definitely a factor, but absolutely, this is one of the most exciting club tournaments in the world right now. Global club tournaments in the world. Of course, the UEFA Champions League has its own glamour. The CONMEBOL has its own glamour, but when it comes to globally matching styles, matching different forms of playing football, I think this is the most exciting tournament that there is. There exists no other. There
I,
exists no other. And can I rephrase your question? I think this is the best form of the Club World Cup that they could have come up with, and it's executed to perfection, and it's brought out a side that I hadn't previously witnessed, and honestly, I didn't think I would enjoy as much as I have. The iteration of the Club World Cup previously was, I think, just sort of a throwaway tournament. And now, with the way this tournament has gone, I'm actually looking forward to the next iteration, because now this is something that all the other clubs can aspire to get into, because then they get the opportunity to play against some of these global clubs that they would not have the opportunity to play in any other way, and honestly compete for that title of best in the world. So, yes, I think the club that wins this will sort of have that claim, but there could be some sort of a caveat to it because this is the first iteration. The selection of the teams has been based across a array of different criteria. But I think moving on, this is going to be one of the most exciting club tournaments. I think you mentioned this last time when we were talking about the Club World Cup in general. The good aspects of the Club World Cup are phenomenal, and then some of the chinks just will improve on how great this tournament has been. There's a lot to build on moving forward.
I just want to because the only thing I heard that you used, and not just you, but people in the chat used to sort of say, no, it's not the biggest tournament, is that there are some teams that are missing from this tournament. And my response to that would be the old best tournament in the world, the UEFA Champions League, the one that crowned the best team in the world, doesn't have all of the best teams in Europe in it. And also doesn't have all the best teams from the world in it. But specifically, even in Europe, you have to qualify for that the year before in order to participate in the UEFA Champions League. And that doesn't always happen. Just look at Napoli, who won the Serie A this year. You would consider the best team in Italy. They didn't qualify for the Champions League. So even though they're great this year, they wouldn't even have had a chance to prove themselves in that tournament. So I don't think having every single team that's considered great being in the tournament is necessarily important as long as they have access to qualify. Now, if your point is they didn't know preemptively, like the tournament criteria was selected retroactively, and so they didn't know they should have been building to try and get into this tournament back in 2021. Like I can live with that. I can find that. But I guess just the way this tournament's been treated, the intensity and desire to win from all of these teams, I thought has been so impressive. And so for me, like, if you don't want to say it this year, I can live with that. But I think moving forward, this is going to be the tournament based on how successful this was this season. And as you know, as we mentioned, we talked about last time, like all the things that felt wrong, not having enough fans in the state or not picking the stadiums correctly or whatever you want to say, and the sponsors and the TV deal and all that stuff. Now that they've seen it live, Like, I think all of that's going to get drastically better moving forward. So, and Gabriela says, I believe Barcelona is the best team in the world right now, but, they would have had to qualify for this over the next 4 years in order to be in it next time. And that's not necessarily a guarantee, because we just saw in the last 4 years they weren't able to do it. So, anyways, I think that's very interesting, and I think it's awesome that Inter Miami gets to participate in it, and I think it will be sad if we don't get to participate in it again next year. And that goes back to my point about this episode. I want us to appreciate the fact that we get to be a part of this, because I think this is unbelievably cool. I've had so much fun watching the group stages, and I think as we get into the knockout stages, as long as Inter Miami's in it, it's going to be so much fun to be a part of.
And usually the group stages are not as fun and the knockouts are more fun. But I think even the group stages in this tournament have really lived up to expectations. There's definitely a case to be made that the European teams were not prepared to what came their way. They didn't think that some of these other teams from Africa, from South America, from the MLS, from the Middle East were so capable of going toe to toe. The stylistic matchups were absolutely fascinating. And for me, that I think is the biggest USP, the value add of this tournament. You don't get to see that anywhere in the world. Nowhere would you be able to see a African team going up against a Mexican team in a competitive environment. And that in itself is so fun.
But you're right. That's cool, but that's not the only reason it's cool. It's cool because when you actually watch it, it's super intense and interesting, and it is a battle. Like, it's like interesting that it's these two unique styles and teams from across the world. But then when we actually saw it on the field, it was a ton of fun to watch too. So, I don't know. I just think this is a really, really cool tournament. And so as we're talking about Inter Miami's place in it, to get to the knockout stages, the final 16 of a tournament that I think you can make an argument is going to crown the champion of the world, is pretty special. And by the way, like, every step they go from here, I understand that if they do upset PSG, we're going to have the same conversation about Bayern Munich or whoever is in the next round, where it's like, maybe it'll happen for us. Maybe we'll pull it out. Maybe we'll have more confidence. But like, at some point, in all likelihood, this is going to end, and we're going to be sad about it ending. And so while we're here, I just really want to appreciate it. Okay, let's get more to Inter Miami specific. Is this the high point of the Lionel Messi era?
As a snapshot in time, absolutely. I think if you ask me this question next week, I'll probably say no, it's not, because then we will have the full picture.
Yeah,
but I think
as
a snapshot in time, I think this is definitely a high of the Lionel Messi era, because I think more so than anything else, of course, winning trophies for me would be paramount. The League's Cup, high up there. Supporter Shield, definitely high up there. Getting that points record, obviously. This is slightly more special because nobody gave us any chance. The expectations were so low. We went from the lowest of the low, where we're coming out of the MLS thinking, how the hell is this team going to compete with some of the best teams in the world with the way we've been performing? We were truly atrocious for large parts of the last 3 months. And it just didn't feel like we were a team. It just didn't feel like everybody was on the same page. And come this tournament, it feels like I've started a whole new chapter where Inter Miami has been playing on a completely different plane to what we were used to. And I think going from that low to now going to this high has been absolutely fantastic. I have thoroughly enjoyed myself. The emotions, the games themselves have been so fascinating, so intense. And the battles that Inter Miami has had to go through to be able to get to the next stage makes this all the more special. I still think winning the trophies is highest up there. So I would say this is one of the high points of Lionel Messi era, not the high point.
The Leagues Cup, when he first came, and I think you made a great point where it's like, the trophies are awesome, but when you expect the trophies, they don't feel quite as good, and you only actually feel worse when you don't get them than feel good when you do get them. So the League's Cup run, when we had the worst team in the league and it was Messi's debut, like I don't think anyone really expected them to go win that tournament. At least I didn't expect them to go win that tournament. And so that run was incredible, except it was also like we had this new thing that was Messi, and he felt invincible, like invincible. And so it was like, oh, you're going to go play on the road at Philadelphia in the semifinal against a team that doesn't give up any goals. Put 4 in them just for fun. Like it was so easy, and it felt almost like we had a cheat code. It was awesome. That final was incredible. Drake calendar save, all of it. I mean, take me back. But uh, when we get into the 2024 season, I think we have those expectations that like they're gonna win the Supporter Shield, and we're disappointed when they get knocked out in the quarterfinals of the League's Cup, and of course the playoffs were awful. And so winning the Supporter Shield in that moment in Columbus with the penalty save on Cucho Hernandez and doing it on the road against Columbus, who was sort of this team we were butting heads with for much of that year, that was awesome. The environment, that night, all of that, but the expectation was like super high at that point. And then we come into this year and it's like we're on the edge for so much of it. The early MLS season has been, I think, disappointing by the expectations and standards that we set for ourselves. The CONCACAF Champions Cup, we were clearly expected to beat that Cavalier and Sporting Kansas City. By the time we faced anyone solid, it was LAFC, and that was like as hard as it got. And we were disappointed with how hard it was. And then obviously Vancouver. So like this season hasn't been filled with sort of high points. But then we got to this tournament and it's like this All Elite
Zero
team's
expectations. Yeah.
the All Elite team is like really good. And so even if you play well, even if Javier Mascherano puts the perfect lineup out, you could still lose. And we went into that game and every single counterattack from them felt so deadly. But then you had Ian Frey going down the right side and like, crossing people over and creating corners, and he's taking a long shot on his left foot and trying to curl it into the back post like he's Lionel Messi. And then it's just been on the edge of your seat. All of the games have been really tight and good. So it hasn't been any moment in any game where you can kind of just like relax and say, we got this. It's easy. Because you always know the competition is so good that they can come back. And it makes getting to that final so much, it's so much sweeter.
Valuable.
Yeah. And so I really do feel like in this moment, we're in a special high moment. So we don't have to argue whether it's better than the other two, but just this is as high as, I think, or, we're splitting hairs on if this is the highest moment in Miami history. And it's certainly the highest moment of this 2025 team. And I think in 5 years, we're going to remember it as one of the high peaks of Lionel Messi's Inter Miami era. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I think the energy is there. I think this accomplishment is at that level already.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think when we look back on it, regardless of how the game against PSG goes, this is going to be such a fun tournament for us, especially as the first one. I think we're constantly going to talk and refer back to these games. And this will be a model for Inter Miami to now emulate. If we can go out and compete with Al Ahly the way we did, if we can go out and beat Porto, if we can go out and win against Palmeiras, of course, circumstances matter, but why can't we continue to grow as a club to the point where we can do this on a consistent basis, right? We showed that we belong. Now it's a matter of consistency. But when it comes to this particular tournament, what we've done over the last 3 games, I think is going to stay with every single Inter Miami fan. I think that 3-hour pre-game episode that we did, I don't think anybody expected Inter Miami to be here after that 3-hour pregame show. And we're going to talk about those moments. We're going to talk about those feelings from having no hope to being so proud of our team. And I think that in itself is one of the biggest accomplishments as fans. And that's why it's so precious and so valuable to hold on to this, because it doesn't happen. It's a once in a lifetime sort of a feeling to have. So you bottle this and you hold on to this because it is a lightning in a bottle moment.
And you think about the World Cup, Um, I'm a U.S. men's national team fan, and we played against England in the 2022 World Cup, and we had a very competitive draw that it was 0-0, but I think the USMNT had the best chance of the game to potentially win it, and they get out into the knockout rounds, and you feel really good. And that midfield is young and dynamic. It's going to carry you for the next half decade, and then you go play the Netherlands, and they exploit all your weaknesses, and you're like, oh, let's get a new coach so that we can fill those weaknesses. And that's what you're thinking about. And you're thinking, okay, the World Cup's over. Who's that 21-year-old that wasn't able to get a chance in this window, but he could be a difference? And like all of a sudden, it's the page is turned. You're into the next phase of your fandom. And when this tournament ends for Inter Miami, whether it's on Sunday or next Friday or whenever it happens, whether they win the whole thing, we're gonna do a post-game reaction. We're gonna do a recap. And then we're going to talk about what this means for the rest of the season. And the page will have turned to the MLS season and the Leagues Cup, and can they win the MLS Cup, and who are they going to sign in the summer? And like the page just continually turns, and most of the pages are going to be worse than the page we're on right now. And so I love the page we're on right now, and I want to keep reading it,
Absolutely, man.
Okay. Next. I think I mentioned it on one of our podcasts, but I want to dive deeper into it. 3 teams in the MLS were in this tournament: Seattle, LAFC, and Inter Miami. Seattle, we knew, was in the group of death. Well, they were the weakling in their group. Let's put it that way. They played PSG, Atletico Madrid, and Botafogo. I thought they were much more competitive than I was expecting them to be. And I thought they held a good account of themselves. And I think they should be proud of sort of how they stood up to it. But they also got 0 points. They lost all 3 games. And so that's great. That's fine. Like that's what was expected. And that's fine. And LAFC, they had I thought they had a solid performance against Chelsea, considering the talent gap. Very disappointing game against Esperance de Tunis. And then they do get a point in that third game against Flamengo. But, Flamengo just needed a draw. LAFC needed desperate for something good to feel about this tournament. But those 2 teams are going to be footnotes. And Inter Miami is going to be a team that made it.
Headlines.
And, people are talking about it on ESPN and upsets, and it's making people think, okay, maybe this MLS has more to it because they can actually win games. They're not just going to have a competitive 2-0 loss. They're going to go out and beat Porto. They're going to go have a 2-0 lead in the 80th minute against Palmeiras, etc. They're going to make Palmeiras look bad. They're going to make Al-Ahly look bad. They're going to make Porto look bad through periods of that game. So I guess my question is, does this make Inter Miami the most prestigious team in the MLS in the eyes of the world?
Absolutely. Has to be, right? Because the opportunity is there to shine on the global stage. This could have been a miserable failure for the MLS. So I want to say congratulations to Seattle, LAFC, and of course Miami for competing, having good games. LAFC obviously got a point. Seattle was in a really, really difficult group, but were never blown out of the water. Didn't have an embarrassing result as such. Inter Miami, obviously head and shoulders above the other 2. And I think that changes everything when it comes to how the MLS is viewed. I know other fans from other MLS teams completely despise the fact that Inter Miami, which is a 6-year-old club, has been the face of MLS in the last 2 years since Messi came. And a lot of the times it was about Messi, him dominating headlines, Messi's team. And that's completely understandable. Of course, he's the talisman, he's the leader, he is the one who has changed the entire face of this club. We are in the Lionel Messi era, as we call it. But I think for fans of football who've seen Inter Miami play, and I've actually watched the games against Porto, Al-Ahly, and Palmeiras, you see all these players. I know it's very easy to just watch the highlights and be like, oh, Messi had that magic moment. He's the one who won the game. But if you actually look and think about it in depth and actually see the tactics, a lot of players I can name on my fingers that outshone their opponents. They actually stood out. They showed that they belonged. And in that sense, Inter Miami as a collective team, not just Messi's team, proved to the world that they are the face of the MLS in every sense of the word. This is the team that the MLS is going to be associated with for the foreseeable future, whether you like it or whether you don't like it. This is the team, the first team from North America to make it into a knockout stage of the Club World Cup, the first team from North America to beat a European legacy club, the first team in North America to go out there and put on a show. Inter Miami has done a lot in this tournament to expand their global brand, to expand their reach to new audiences, but not just in terms of the commercial sense. The biggest source of pride for me is the fact that Inter Miami has done it in the footballing sense. We've gone toe to toe against Palmeiras. We've gone toe to toe against the best in Africa, and we've beaten one of the legacy clubs in European football. That's no joke. And I think that designates Inter Miami as one of the best clubs in the MLS at the moment. Of course, seasons go up and down. Inter Miami may not win the Supporters Shield, may not be as dominant in the MLS once they go back, but they are going to always be remembered as the face of the MLS, at least at this point in time. Whether that's because of Lionel Messi or away from him, I think Inter Miami is the most prized possession, even when it comes to attracting talent, when it comes to attracting commercial opportunities, and now I think in a footballing sense as well.
And I do think that will translate to attracting players moving forward.
Exactly.
Have you seen the movie Miracle?
I have not. I should
I watched
watch
it
it.
twice this week. You should definitely watch it. You should absolutely watch it. It's
Yeah.
a great movie. I've watched it twice this week already. And there's a scene right before the big game between the U.S. Olympic hockey team and the Russian or the Soviet hockey team in 1980, where the announcer for that game says, it's one thing to be young and promising, and it's another thing to be good. And I think everyone knows the MLS is young and promising and has significant potential. And even in the chat today, Jerry's talking about what they can do to sort of take steps towards reaching that potential. And it is a young league, and the fandoms, we go and we've seen in Columbus how intense that environment can be, and all these other clubs that have great environments. And Inter Miami, I think, is going to have that a year from now when they have their own stadium where that is magnified. It's going to be, I hope, as intense as any in the country, in the MLS. But it's another thing to be good. And LAFC and Seattle were representatives of a young and promising league. And Inter Miami proved that they were good. And they deserve to be here in the second round because of that, in the knockout stages, because they are good. And so I think when we're talking about the MLS being a league with a lot of potential that can recruit players that are 35 and maybe a couple that are 22, but it's really still hard to get those 26, 27-year-old prime age players. Are they actually good? Is it actually a competitive league? And then Inter Miami says, yeah, you want to see us prove it? Here, we'll show you. And that's not every team in the league, but that's us. That's what we do. And so I do think when we're talking about, you're right, you mentioned the commercial aspect, which doesn't interest me as much because I think our owners have plenty of money. But can we recruit better players so that we can establish ourselves not just under Lionel Messi,
From a legacy standpoint,
but can we establish that we are the best team moving forward?
Exactly.
Even without Lionel Messi. And I think this did go a long way. And I also think, I know the Galaxy have many MLS Cups, certainly more than us, but I don't think we need to get as many as them to have more history now that we've accomplished this. You win 2 or 3 and you have this, you win a CONCACAF Champions Cup and you have this, all of a sudden, this is something that other clubs don't have. So I think
this is the start of a legacy, man. This is the start of a legacy. This is how dynasties are built, and you have to pick your moments. And I'm also always going to look back at this Club World Cup as when Inter Miami arrived in the global stage. if you put Seattle
It's a
or
great way to put it.
LAFC, if you put Seattle or LAFC in our group, I don't know if they win it or
They
even if
don't.
they
They
get
don't.
through.
They definitely
They
don't.
don't. Yeah. So for me, this is Inter Miami's arrival on the global stage.
I like the way you put that. By the way, I just want you to know when we get to that pregame show on Sunday morning, I am going to have so many references from the movie Miracle, and I think you should watch it. I think it'll imbue you with more confidence. Speaking of, let's talk about this game coming up because
Do we
Inter
have to?
Miami, Inter Miami is going to face the champions of Europe. What I would have considered 3 weeks ago the trophy that gives them the claim as the best team in the world. And that's who we're playing on Sunday in Atlanta. How you feeling about it?
Honestly, bring them on. I couldn't care less how the game goes. Everything from here, well, when the game actually goes, I'm going to be tense and nervous, and I'm going to be obviously talking about why Inter Miami is not doing this right or that right. But at this moment in time, I think everything is a added bonus. The fact that we're getting the opportunity to play against PSG on a competitive stage in itself is, I think, a moment of pride and privilege. Um, Inter Miami needs to take this seriously, obviously, right? And the players are obviously going to think we are going to go there and try to win, regardless of who's against us. That should be the mentality. But even as fans, I was going to say this is just enjoy it, just sit through it. I hope my team does well and makes us proud. But if that doesn't happen, that for me is an expectation. I want Inter Miami to perform well, not be embarrassed, play well, show what they're capable of, because we have the talent to at least give something, give PSG something to think about. We have that ability. But if that doesn't happen, if God forbid it goes wrong, I will be slightly disappointed and upset at the time, but I think the context of it all is just, it's too big. And right now we're in a moment that's bigger than just one game. So I'm going to rationalize it, and eventually after the game I'm going to be like, whatever happens, for good or for bad, I'm going to think of this as a positive for Inter Miami overall.
Well, and that's when we can come back and listen to the first 45 minutes of this episode to
Exactly.
remind ourselves how cool and fun this was. I want to say something about this game. Inter Miami is not going to get blown out. I think anyone that thinks that is not been paying attention, truthfully. Um, Inter Miami has proven they belong on the field with these teams. And I know PSG is the best, but the gulf between Porto and Palmeiras and PSG is not the difference between you being even on the field or even maybe a little better and losing 7-0. That's not going to happen. Or that's like a 1 in 100 chance that's going to happen. Inter Miami is much more likely to win this game by 2 goals than lose by 7. That's so. I hope no one thinks
My
or is
only
preparing
concern
for that.
is that because given how thin Inter Miami's squad is and how many injuries we're suffering from, this could be that one game where if we concede early and things don't go well at the start, the floodgates would open. Not to the point that I think we lose 7-0, but I think Mistiano coming in with the hammer. Not to the point that I think we lose with that scoreline, but maybe we concede 3 or 4. I hope that doesn't happen. But I agree with you. I think there's a lot more data points and a lot more sample size to suggest that Inter Miami has not been easy to score on. This tournament has not been easy to score in. If teams can buckle down and have a good solid block, it's not easy for a lot of these teams to score. Auckland was the only team that got truly blown out in this
Oh
tournament. I
no!
don't
Don't
think
forget about
there's,
Atletico Madrid.
yes, of course, 4-0. But that again was, I think, floodgates open. And at that point, you were like, okay,
Yeah, that
Atletico doesn't
game.
have the.
That game was 2-0 at the 90th minute. They got
It
a couple
wasn't
extra goals.
representative of how Atletico played at that time, and I think they got a red card in that game as well. So There's a chance. There's always a chance, man. Even if it's 1% or 0.5% or 0.25%, I'm gonna hold on to the
It's
hope.
not that low though. It's not that
And
low.
yeah, but I'm saying worst case scenario. And there's a universe where you and I are going to get on that post game raw reaction, and we're going to be losing our minds because Inter Miami just beat PSG. I'm not saying that it is this universe, but it is some universe. And in
No,
that
they
universe,
can.
Scotty and Saur are happy.
I've been pretty happy during most of this episode.
Yeah.
No, they can win this game. Inter Miami can
Yeah.
win this game. I don't think it's like it's gonna be. It's not gonna be as easy as it was against Porto, but it's not gonna be like. Are you raising your hand?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm feeling a little bit humble talking about PSG. I don't think I would ever get to talk about PSG as a competitor to Inter Miami. So I was gonna say, to your point, I don't think Inter Miami can do the same thing as they did in the last three games where they tried to play their game. I think this is a game where you have to
So
play the opponent, not your game.
this is what I wanted to talk about because I don't know if I agree with you. One of the things about this PSG team is they are very big and physical in positions that generally don't have a ton of physicality and size. Their fullbacks are super athletic. They're big, they're strong. Nuno Mendes and Ashraf Hakimi, they are like physically imposing. And so when you see the fullback are like, big, you're like, okay, that's pretty scary. But then you look at the midfield, realize, okay, they're not actually huge, very technical, very athletic, but they're not big or physical. The center backs are not that physical. They are not particularly good at set piece defense. That is sort of their Achilles heel. I know it's not something Inter Miami thrives in, but we've seen Toto Aviles put in a ball in the back of the net on a corner and do his little heart celebration. I can see a world where that happens, where Inter Miami gets a 1-0 lead off a corner in the 7th minute, and then they have to, push down, and then maybe they'll get another chance on a Messi free kick or something like that. Like, I think there's a way. There's a way that Inter Miami can score goals. There's a way Inter Miami can play defense. And I also think the conventional wisdom about how Inter Miami should play might be wrong. Here's what I'll say. Now I'm hyped up on watching Miracle. The thing that made the U.S. team so good is that they were the best conditioned. And so when it got into the third period at the end of the game, they could outskate the Russians. That was like the big thing. And the work that had to be done to get your secret advantage, that's already been done. Or it hasn't been done, but either way, it's too late. But for Inter Miami, I think truthfully, the advantage is the one or two magic moments that you might get from Luis Suarez, which we absolutely saw against Palmeiras, and maybe from Messi, which we saw against Porto, that you might not get from Kvaratskhelia or Due or Vitinha, some of these guys in this PSG team. So I think there's a way. I think there's a real way. I also think that if Inter Miami puts 10 guys in the box, they're going to lose without a question.
No, I don't think that's the way to win. That's definitely not the way to win.
It's not.
I think there's a way to play pragmatic. And when I say Inter Miami can't do what they did against the other three teams, I think Inter Miami wanted to impose their style of play against them, and they managed to do that to a large extent. I think changed it up here and there, but I think it's the latter that Inter Miami needs to do more of. You have to play the opponent. You have to figure out what the issues are with PSG, and I'm not saying that means sit in a low block and defend for your lives. I'm saying you have to build your tactics. For instance, the way you did against Columbus when you got that 1-0 win against them. That was Columbus. I would say you should have gone and taken the game to Columbus. In this, you have to be a little bit more pragmatic. You'll have to understand what PSG's strengths are. You can't push your fullbacks high up because Nuno Mendes and Hakimi are absolutely going to blow you out of the water. There's no way in a scenario where you have Jordi Alba and you have Chelo Wigan high up, you can't practically go up against Ashraf Hakimi and Nuno Mendes. You cannot. So you have to be pragmatic in that sense. So I think you have to devise a plan where you maximize your strengths and minimize your weaknesses, and then try to neutralize PSG's advantage. You mentioned they're very technical in the midfield. Vitinha, João Neves, Fabian Ruiz, very technical, but they're small in size. So be combative in the midfield. So that's what I'm talking about when you have to take the game to them, in the sense that you have to adjust your gameplay based on who you're going up against. It's the same as a boxer preparing for his opponent, right? You have to see what the strengths and weaknesses of your opponent are. You have to be a little bit more pragmatic in this case. And that's what I think Inter Miami needs to do to even think of winning this game. I
Why do
think
you
it's going
think?
to be very hard, but we'll see.
Why do you think they can't win the midfield?
There's just too much technicality in there. Just too much technicality in there. Because the thing is, this is a midfield that's very unique, or at least in the modern sense, they're the perfect modern midfield, because it's not just a player; it's spaces. They don't care about who's in the. You'll have Ashraf Hakimi playing in the middle at some point in the game. They don't care about who's in the middle. They occupy spaces. They go in and out. They turn you inside out just by the movements and the motions that they go through. This is not just going to be Vitinha in the midfield and he holds his position. You're going to have different players coming back. Quara is going to be playing the number 10 spot sometimes. Vitinha is going to be up. Like they change around. They play with spaces. So that for me is the biggest neutralizer for Inter Miami's game style. I don't know
So,
if we're able to win the midfield in that case.
so out of possession, obviously you have to be compact and you
Exactly.
have to make sure that they don't get quality. You have to do your best to make sure they don't get quality chances on your goal. But in possession, I like, is there really reason to think that they're going to shut down Messi in a way that no one else has? I don't think they have that one guy in the midfield that's going to take Messi out of the game. I don't know if Segovia is going to go from looking like a player that belongs in La Liga into someone that doesn't look like he belongs on the pitch. Like, I don't think he's just going to transform. I think he can have a good game. I think Tadeo Allende's speed over the top can be a factor. So let's be clear. I'm not saying Inter Miami should try and dominate the ball. I'm not saying they should try and play in PSG's half. But I think if you're talking about being compact, I don't think it should be in your own box like what Botafogo did. I
Hmm.
think it should be sort of a little bit higher
I
up, try and
agree.
prevent them from getting into your box. Because if you do what they did against Columbus, I think they lose the game. I mean, Columbus created plenty of chances in that game, and Inter Miami got lucky that they didn't convert any of them. They won't get that lucky in this game. So I think Inter Miami has to try and play their game, and by that I mean similar to what we've seen the last two games, where they play reserved, especially with the fullbacks, but that when they get the ball, you can't be afraid to try and play through the midfield. You can't just take Segovia's talent and Busquets' talent out of the way because you're just kicking the ball long every time you touch the ball and you're just hoping Allende can make the run into it, and then not only make the run into it, but then beat a guy in order to get half a chance against Donnarumma. Like, I think you have to try and continue to do what you've done. I don't think the Palmeiras game plan is totally unforgivable in this game, especially because, like you mentioned, you have to try and minimize what they do best, but you also have to try and maximize what you do best. And what you do best is have Messi and Suarez help score goals for you, and they're not going to do that if you're asking them to make 70-yard sprints with the ball every 4 minutes.
No, I agree with you. And I think we're on the same page. And that's why I say you have to be pragmatic. Perhaps the Columbus game was the wrong one. You have to play the opponent
Maybe
that's in
this the
front of you.
Columbus game we won 5-0, maybe.
Yes, maybe that's the one I'm referring to. No, you have to play the opponent that's in front of you. But I'll say this again, and I think that fits into your narrative as well. You maximize your ability and minimize your weaknesses. And if Inter Miami's ability is to play on the ball and get Luis Suarez and Lionel Messi into dangerous positions, then they have to maximize that. And I completely agree with you. I don't think the game plan of sitting back, absorbing pressure for 90 minutes is going to work, because we don't have the bodies or the depth to do that anymore. We may
Or
be able to do that for 65 minutes, but Inter
no,
Miami's defensive ability is going to fade
it's
eventually.
it's not just that. It's not just the energy or the bodies. They don't have the defensive
Yeah,
discipline. They don't have
yeah,
the
no, they don't. We're
organization.
not
They
that
don't do
compact.
this a lot. Like I think if they sit back into a low box block in their own box, they're gonna lose this
And
game.
at the end of the day, I think you and I would both agree if Inter Miami ends up losing 5-2, but we've played a fun game. We've tried to take the game to PSG. We've tried our best. I think we'll be more than happy
Uh,
with that.
yeah, I'll be honest. I don't think there's anything that could happen in this game
But yeah,
that will like really upset me. Like I think the challenge is obvious. So for me, it's whatever happens is I'm okay with. Now, the one thing that would really break me is if Inter Miami does have a 1-goal lead going into the 89th minute and then they give it up and then they lose, because will have been so close. But at the same time, that's the difference between great teams and good teams. And um, if Inter Miami can get themselves into that position, it would be really, really cool. And I would take that right now. Donnarumma is a better goalkeeper than Oscar Stadi. I think Oscar Stadi has to outplay Donnarumma in this game.
yeah, absolutely. I don't know if that happens or not, but Oscar Starry has to put on a man of the match performance again, for the last time, I guess, or for another time.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think if he's not excellent, we're in trouble. I think if Maxi Falcone and Totavios are not excellent, we're in trouble. No Allen, Cello Wiegand. Sorry. Suarez, Messi, Segovia,
Oh yeah, Allende,
Busquets,
Busquets,
Redondo, Kramasky,
yeah.
Allende, yeah. But I think it's there. I think it's out there.
And they're going to relish this opportunity. They're going to absolutely relish going up against PSG. Messi more so than everyone else, because, of course, the history speaks for itself. And they're going up against the Champions League winners. And if they're able to beat the Champions League winners, what we've just discussed, the conversation that we've had, we're going to have that same conversation, just exponentially bigger.
Um, I think that they can be the better team on
the day.
Sunday morning. And I think that's what they're going to have to be. Obviously, they're not going to luck into this, but I think it can happen. Not sure I'm going to predict it, but I haven't watched Miracle more than twice yet. Give me another couple days and we'll get there.
All
I
right.
will tell you,
Sounds good.
after the first time I watched it, I was so ready for this game. But now I haven't watched it since yesterday. So, all right. So, any final thoughts before we wrap it up? I did want to have this episode because I do want us to just have like a moment where we can get on the mic and just verbalize how cool it is to be here and how good it feels to be in this situation, so that when we feel differently as we turn the page to the next chapter, whenever that may be, we can come back to this and sort of appreciate it. So that's all I had. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about? I know there's a lot of other stuff going on around Inter Miami. The MLS roster salary reports came out and all that stuff. But I think when this tournament ends for Inter Miami, we're gonna turn the page and we're gonna talk about what the next page looks like. But for now, I'm just in this moment.
No, all I'm going to say is, for Inter Miami fans, relish this opportunity, enjoy Sunday. For whatever happens over the course of 90 minutes, nothing can take away the fact that Inter Miami made it to the knockout rounds of the Club World Cup and they earned that spot. So anyone who ever said that Inter Miami did not earn the spot in this tournament, all of that is gone out the window. Get behind your team, enjoy those 90 minutes, and just support them, because they're going to need it. But also, those moments don't come again. Go enjoy that.
Guys, we will be back 1 hour before kickoff on Sunday morning for the pregame show. We will see you then. And I will leave you with this last prediction. In this game, the underdog is going to bite. We'll see you guys then. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this and have a wonderful day.